1936, Aomori, Japan. Picture this. Yoshie Shiratori, an innocent man trapped behind bars for a crime he never committed. In a world where justice turned its back, he faced a relentless prosecution, hungry for a death sentence. Day in, day out, he endured torture and beatings from merciless guards. But Shiratori wasn't a man to give up. Against all odds, he made a daring decision. It was time to escape. Buckle up for a thrilling tale of resilience and the will to break free. The Aomori prison was not an easy fortress to break free from, but for someone like Yoshie Shiratori, who had nothing left to lose, it presented a challenge he was ready to take on. At 6 a.m. one day, he made his move. He knew there was a 15-minute window during the change of guard shifts, a pattern he had studied for months. As soon as the corridor was clear, he used a piece of wire he had discreetly removed from the bathroom sink to begin picking the lock. His hands were numb from the severe cold, but after a few tense minutes he succeeded, and the cell door opened. But this was just the beginning, as multiple doors still stood between him and freedom. Aware that he had only precious minutes before the guards returned, he didn't waste any time. Door after door, he managed to unlock them all and finally stepped out of the prison building. Freedom was just a step away, but for Shiratori, it was a step through a minefield. Picture him just beyond the prison walls, yet smack in the middle of a high-alert zone. One wrong move, and he'd be back in chains. It's 6:15 a.m. The guards peek into his cell. There lies Shiratori, or so they think, peacefully asleep. Little do they know, under that blanket isn't a man, but a clever ruse, a pile of wooden scraps artfully arranged. Shiratori had outsmarted them, but they wouldn't realize it until the next day. But hold on, there's more to this incredible story. You're about to dive into the deeper layers of Shiratori's daring escape. So, grab your seat and lean in. The next part of this tale will leave you absolutely spellbound. Only 3 days of freedom. That's all Yoshie Shiratori tasted before fate dealt its next hand. Caught red-handed trying to swipe equipment from a hospital, he was whisked back to his cell. His bold leap for liberty? It landed him a life sentence. Imagine, never again, seeing his wife and daughter, a heart-wrenching thought. Months of plotting, all for just 72 hours of fleeting freedom, followed by a lifetime in chains. But here's the twist. Shiratori was now more than just a prisoner. He was becoming a legend, the prison escape artist. And trust me, his story was just warming up. In 1942, 6 years after his escape, Yoshie Shiratori was moved to Akita Prison in Akita City during World War II. Things got even tougher for him there. The guards knew about his escape before, so they were really strict with him. They wanted to make sure he, or anyone else, wouldn't try to escape again. They treated him really badly. He had to do hard work, sleep on the cold floor without anything to lie on, and they often put him in solitary confinement for a long time. But this was no ordinary solitary confinement. The cell was specially designed for escape artists. Extremely small, with very high ceilings and walls covered in thin copper plates, too smooth to lean on for rest. It was a pit of darkness, receiving no sunlight, with the only light entering through a small window in the ceiling. This room was a fortress, crafted to ensure that no one skilled in escapes could break free. Even though things were really hard in prison, the guards always kept Shiratori's hands tied up, but there was a kind guard, Kobayashi, who was the chief of the guards. He felt sorry for Shiratori. He never hurt him, checked on him sometimes, and even spoke to him nicely. This kindness probably helped Shiratori keep going, staying strong and hopeful. Then, on a rainy night, June 15th, something amazing happened. Shiratori was alone in his cell, like always. But when a guard looked in at midnight, Shiratori was gone. He had disappeared, leaving only his chains behind. Everyone was shocked. How did he manage to get out? The guards thought they had Shiratori trapped with heavy chains. But for him, getting out of chains was easy. People say he might have used a wire to unlock them, just like he did before in Aomori Prison. It's not clear how he got the wire, maybe during his short breaks from solitary, or maybe the kind chief guard, Kobayashi, gave it to him. Once he was out of the chains, he used his hands and feet to climb the walls that were very close together. The guards even said he climbed like a lizard. The first time he got to the small window at the top, he couldn't open it. But he noticed the wood around it was old and breaking. So every night when no one was watching, he'd take off his chains, climb up, work on loosening the window frame, then climb back down and put the chains back on. After a few months, he could open the window, But he didn't escape right away. He waited for a stormy night. He knew the noise from the rain and wind would cover up any sound he made. This smart planning helped him escape from prison a second time. Now, see what happened next. 3 months after his escape, on September 18th, there's a knock on Kobayashi's door. He's the chief guard who was kind to Shiratori. Imagine his surprise when he opens the door and finds Shiratori there, looking all worn out and desperate. Kobayashi brings him in, gives him food, and hears his story. Shiratori tells him, "Look, I didn't mind being in prison for a crime I did, but I escaped because of the torture. The guards were brutal, I am innocent, and you, Kobayashi, were the only one kind to me. That's why I came to you with my plan. I'm going to give myself up to the police and take the guards to court. I want to show everyone how bad the prison system is in Japan. I'm going to fight for change, to clear my name, and to get justice for my wife and daughter. I can't keep running away. That's no way to live." Shiratori's plan was bold, an escapee turning himself in. What's more, his credibility would be bolstered by the only person who had treated him kindly in Akita prison, Kobayashi himself. Shiratori felt he was doing the right thing, which is why he approached Kobayashi and shared his plan. Then, while Shiratori was in the bathroom, Kobayashi called the police. Shiratori's trust in Kobayashi was misplaced, and his plan failed. The police captured him and returned him to prison. His betrayal was a profound shock. From then on, he trusted no one among the prison guards. But after this second escape, he received an additional 3-year sentence on top of his existing life imprisonment. During his trial, Shiratori requested a transfer to Tokyo prison, citing the milder climate, as he could no longer endure the harsh cold of the northern prisons. His previous escape attempts had weakened him. However, not only was his request denied, but the judge, who seemed particularly harsh towards him, instead sent him to Abashiri prison in Hokkaido. Located in the far north of Japan, Abashiri was infamous for being escape-proof. Anyone who tried to flee would have to survive a deadly winter wilderness. By 1943, the conditions in Abashiri prison were unbearable, with temperatures in the cells often dropping below freezing. The food provided to the prisoners would freeze before they could even eat it. Despite this extreme cold, Shiratori was placed in his cell, wearing only summer clothes, sitting immobile as if paralyzed by the frigid temperatures. In a bold move, Shiratori stood up to the guards, full of anger. They knocked him down, but he got right back up, unbroken. He looked them in the eye and promised he'd escape again, telling them they couldn't stop him. "You think these chains will hold me? No way. I've got a ton of tricks to get out of these, and if I can't unlock them, I'll just break them," he said. And right then, he snapped the chain in front of the shocked guards. It was clear to everyone that Shiratori wasn't just good at climbing. He had other skills too. But showing off like this wasn't the smartest move. Now that the guards knew what he could do, they put him in a cell that looked totally escape-proof. Shiratori's new cell was a fortress of steel, designed to be unbreakable. It had no weak spots, no rust, and every opening was too small for him to fit through. They put him in chains like never before, his hands tied behind his back, his legs bound, making it hard for him to move. These new chains were heavy, 20 kilograms, and had no keyhole, no lock. Only a special team could open them, and that took 2 hours just for his rare showers. The cell was freezing, and the worst of winter hadn't even hit yet. With the brutal cold and the even harsher winter coming, it didn't look like Shiratori would keep his strength. To make things worse, the guards cut his food down to half a meal. Shiratori was at his lowest, drained of energy. The guards would leave his food near the door, and he had to crawl to get it like a dog. The chains made everything painful, even sleeping. Life in Abashiri prison was a nightmare. Somehow, he made it through the winter, and when spring came, he found a little bit of strength. But in such a state, trapped in that steel cell, what could he possibly do? For months, nothing changed in Shiratori's grim cell. But then, one night, an office guard heard a strange noise from the ceiling. Checking the cells, he reached Shiratori's to find an unexpected scene. The bed was neatly made, and those special handcuffs that needed experts to open were just lying there, unlocked by the bed. Shiratori was nowhere to be found. Alarms blared, but it was too late. Shiratori had disappeared as if he'd just vanished into thin air. But how did he pull off such an escape from the tough Abashiri prison? The escape plan had started 6 months earlier. Despite being weak and constantly chained, Shiratori had 2 things: time and patience. Every day, he saved a bit of his small food portions, secretly using the soup to smear on the iron window frame and his handcuffs. His idea was simple, yet clever. The salt in the food would slowly corrode and weaken the iron. And it worked. By the end of spring, the iron was weak enough to break. The guards thought they had made the openings too small for anyone to get through. But they underestimated Shiratori's incredible flexibility. Once he got his head through the window, he could twist and turn his body to squeeze through. This incredible feat made him the first person to ever escape from Abashiri prison. But remember, this prison was in a harsh northern region. The winters were brutal. The guards even joked that if the cold didn't get him, the bears in the mountains would. Shiratori's escape wasn't just daring, it was against all odds. When the news of his second escape spread, the only person who hoped Shiratori would survive was his wife. She was worried and saddened, knowing that even if he survived the cold, he wouldn't be able to return to them as the police would continue their pursuit. Secretly, she wished for Japan's defeat in the war, because if Japan lost, America would take control of the country. She believed that under American rule, the prison system would change and some crimes might be overlooked, reducing the urgency to search for Shiratori. Her wish came true in August 1945, a year after Shiratori's escape, when America indeed took over the country. The prison system underwent changes and the pursuit of Shiratori was no longer a priority. But everyone was wondering, where was Shiratori and was he still alive? The answer is, he was very much alive. But he had chosen a life of solitude. He found an old mine on a mountain in Hokkaido and turned it into his home. He lived off fruits, whatever he could find in the forest, and hunted rabbits and raccoons. He was doing pretty well, living all by himself, but after 2 years of complete isolation, his curiosity won over. He hadn't talked to or seen anyone in so long, so he decided to visit the nearest village. What he saw was like stepping into another world. There were English signs everywhere, no more wartime banners, and the most surprising thing was seeing Japanese women with American soldiers. He was totally confused. He found a newspaper and read about the bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki, and learned that Japan had surrendered the year before. This news hit him hard. He felt like all his time hiding was wasted. So, he left his life in the wild and started to head south from Abashiri. Shiratori walked for like 50 days straight until he hit Sapporo, a big city. By then, he was starving. So he spots this tomato farm and thinks, hey, I'll grab a bite. It was a big mistake. A farmer catches him red-handed and thinks he's some notorious local thief. Things got really out of hand, and before he knew it, Shiratori had accidentally stabbed the farmer, who, sadly, didn't make it. It didn't take long for the cops to catch him, and they're like, wait, isn't this the guy who's always escaping from prison? Now, he's not just an escape artist. He's a murderer. Shiratori's trying to tell them it was all self-defense, but the court's not buying it. They slap him with a death sentence. In 1947, Shiratori found himself in Sapporo prison, counting down to his death sentence. The guards weren't taking any chances this time. They had him under watch 24/7. Picture this, 6 armed guards just for him. And the cell? It was like Fort Knox compared to where he was before. Stronger doors, tougher ceilings, bars, windows, you name it. They made sure every single gap was tinier than his head. They knew about his twist and turn escape tricks, but they figured as long as his head couldn't fit, he wasn't going anywhere. Believe it or not, they were so sure of their setup that they didn't even bother chaining him up. Shiratori, a bit older and staring death in the face, seemed like he'd given up. He'd just look up as if he was trying to find a way out, but come on, everyone thought that was impossible. Just to be safe, though, they'd still check up on him all the time, especially during shower time. Months went by, and as winter rolled in, Shiratori got weaker. It looked like he was starting to accept his fate. He spent most of his time just sleeping, ignoring the guards, and not even getting up when they told him to. This went on until one day the guards, totally fed up with him not answering them, decided to punish him. They yanked off his blanket, but surprise, he wasn't there. He had vanished into thin air. Everyone was stumped. How did he manage this time? From the day he got there, they had their eyes on him non-stop. He tricked them by always looking up, pretending to be on the lookout for a way out. The guards thought they knew his game, climbing out windows, so they only watched the walls and windows, totally forgetting about the floor. That was their big mistake, and it made Shiratori's escape a whole lot easier than before. All he had to do was lift the wooden floor. For someone like him, pulling up the floorboards and using his meal plate to dig was no big deal. It took him over a month, but he kept his secret well since the guards never thought he'd try something like that. Every night, he'd put the floorboards back after digging. He had everyone thinking he was just a defeated man, always sleeping and never listening to them. But what they thought was Shiratori sleeping under the blanket was actually just the wooden floorboards. Now he had broken out of prison 4 times. It was almost like a weird pattern, getting caught then escaping, over and over. In 1948, Shiratori, now in his 40s, was sitting on a chair in the streets of Sapporo, resting. A police officer sat beside him, intending to smoke, unaware that the man next to him was Shiratori. They struck up a conversation, and Shiratori tried to keep the officer from suspecting his true identity. So, here's something unexpected. The officer suddenly offered Shiratori a cigarette. Back then in Japan, cigarettes were like gold, really fancy stuff. And for a cop to just hand one out, that was pretty unheard of. Shiratori couldn't believe it. He actually started tearing up. It made him think of Kobayashi, the kind prison guard, and how he felt betrayed later. But this officer, who didn't even know who he was showing him respect. While smoking, Shiratori couldn't hold back anymore. He told the officer his full name and admitted he was the guy who had broken out of Sapporo prison last year, and that he had escaped from jail 4 times. It must have felt like a huge weight off his chest. Of course, he got arrested again. But this time, things were different. He had given himself up, and the legal system in Japan was changing. The big shots in Sapporo actually felt sorry for him. They thought maybe the farmer's death really was self-defense. They saw that in all his escapes, he never hurt any guards. They understood he was just trying to get away from torture and wasn't out for revenge. So, they dropped the murder charge and got rid of the death sentence. Shiratori got a 20-year sentence and was sent to a prison in Tokyo, where it's warmer. And get this, the guards there were actually nice to him. They still made sure he couldn't escape, but Shiratori didn't even want to. He didn't have any of the reasons he had before. The bad treatment, the unfair death sentence, the freezing cold up north. He just accepted his punishment and stayed in jail, no trouble at all. After 14 years in 1961, because he remained well-behaved, he was released. For the first time in a long while, he was truly free, not on the run from anything. He decided to return to Aomori, where it all started, and reunited with his daughter, the only remaining member of his family. Because of his remarkable escapes, he became a legendary figure in Japan. That was our story for today. For more stories, you can watch this video. Until the next video, ciao.